India proceeded to, with their own words, hold in abeyance the Indus Water Treaty, which is not allowed for within the treaty, within international law. They threatened to cut off the water supply for 240 million Pakistanis. This threat in itself is a war crime. If they were to act on this threat for Pakistan, it would be a matter of survival. It would turn this to an existential crisis, and we would be left with no choice but to embark on the first water war, and not the first water war at least between two nuclear-armed states. Pakistan has demonstrated throughout this conflict that we are not the aggressors. We showed self-restraint at every opportunity, have called for investigation, have called for dialogue, have called for dialogue and diplomacy in the pursuit of peace, and have maintained the importance of abiding by international law. We are here in Europe, but we're very cognizant of the fact that Europe feels passionate about war, not only because of the history, but because of what you're facing today, the first war on the European continent since World War II. If international law applies in Europe, then it should apply in South Asia. If treaties are respected here, then only they can be respected in our part of the world. So we understand where you're coming from, but we want to convey to you that as it stands at the moment, in our part of the world, the last edifice of cooperation between our two states, India and Pakistan, everything else has been torn apart. The last thing that remained, the Indus Water Treaty, that too, India wants to depart from. If people far away think things that are far away from us don't apply to us, this is none of our business. They couldn't be more wrong. The threshold being so low means that the drop of the hat, we could go to war again. This particular terrorist attack within Indian-occupied Kashmir had no connection to Pakistan. To this day, they haven't been able to share with their own public, with their allies, and certainly haven't shared with us the names, identities of the individuals involved in this terrorist attack. Nor can they even share with us who they have targeted at their so-called targeted operation within Pakistan. We can point to the civilian infrastructure, the dam that they targeted, the facilities that they targeted, and the innocent civilians they killed. They can't name one terrorist that was involved in this terrorist attack that supposedly crossed this heavily armed border between India and Pakistan. Nor can they name a single terrorist that they attacked and killed on Pakistani soil when they violated our sovereignty. We appreciate the role the international community played in helping us achieve this ceasefire. We now look to the international community to engage with India and convince them that the decisions that they have made leave not only us less safe, but leave everybody less safe. There's no military solution to Kashmir. There's no military solution to terrorism, the water issue. Water isn't even, and should never be considered a weapon of conflict. Terrorist attack, particularly post-2019, where the policies of the state have become even more aggressive, repressive, and suppressive. They've moved away from their domestic commitments to the people of Kashmir. In that circumstance, what you're doing is you're creating the perfect environment to breed indigenous terrorism, and that indigenous terrorism will challenge India in a way that no cross-border terrorism ever could. And instead of addressing this issue, we're ignoring the issue and making it worse. If we don't find a solution for Kashmir, and the situation on the ground continues to deteriorate, then the environment is created, and the new youth in Kashmir will form the cannon fodder for the terrorist organizations of tomorrow that will continue to perpetuate these attacks. Before I go into the water, I'd like to sidestep onto the terrorist question. As far as what Pakistan has done, now the militant groups that exist on Pakistani soil are a result of the Cold War politics and the geopolitics of the 1980s. Every single group that you can name today, every single one, there's not one that's out of this orbit. Be it Al-Qaeda, be it the Taliban, be it these groups that are of concern to the Indian government. That's the groups of concern to the Indian government. All of them are a result, are the hangover, are the leftover elements of the Afghan jihad ecosystem in Afghan 1. That decision to set up this network of what was called at the time freedom fighters, who were dubbed at the time
आला सतह पार्लिमानी वफ्द के सरबराह बिलावल भुट्टो जरदारी की यूरोपियन थिंक टैंक को खिते की सूरत हाल पर ब्रीफिंग। उन्होंने कहा कि पाकिस्तान ने भारतीय इल्जाम के बावजूद तहम्मुल का मुजाहरा किया। भारत ने सिंध तास मुआहदे को एक तरफा गैर कानूनी तौर पर मुअत्तल किया। पहलगाम वाक़े पर तहकीकात की पेशकश का मुस्बत जवाब नहीं दिया गया।
At the time was under a dictatorship, and my mother, Benazir Bhutto, was leading the resistance against the dictatorship. Even at that time, she warned the Pakistani authorities and the international community that you're creating a Frankenstein monster that's going to come back and haunt us. And that Frankenstein monster came back and haunted the US at 9/11 and the entire world. Pakistan is part of the international coalition, targeted Al-Qaeda, targeted the Taliban. Well, now the Taliban is off the list, God knows what the definition is over there. Targeted other organizations, reoriented our entire infrastructure of our state to treat some groups which we previously considered as allies as now terrorist organizations. That reorientation was a difficult and bloody process. The political leadership of the country across the board have now developed a consensus, but this consensus wasn't always there. We fought politically against these terrorists on the political battlefield by challenging them politically, and resulted in losing our lives, changing the state policy on the political front. The military leadership of Pakistan is not again the caricature that the world wants to paint of many, many generations ago, where there would have been conflict in this transition, where there would have been anti-Al-Qaeda as a result of 9/11 and their alliances in the world. But when you got down to the officers and the individuals who fought the wars alongside who used to be the Mujahideen, there may have been grey areas. Now, the military leadership in Pakistan have come up through the ranks while combating these terrorists on the front lines. They fought them in Swat, they fought them in South Waziristan, they fought them in North Waziristan. They earned their honors in valor and in bravery while fighting these terrorists, and then got promoted to the current ranks that they are while they lead our armed forces. So in that context, we fought the bloody war over what's left over from Afghan 1. The international community, through FATF, has only recently endorsed Pakistan's actions against the groups of concern to India. So we've lived up to international scrutiny of the FATF that endorsed Pakistan's actions against the LET and other groups, and have approved the actions that Pakistan has taken. And we've gone from the grey list to the white list because they believe that those actions are worth a violin or of significance. Now, so far, I've only talked about the challenges that we faced from Afghan 1. The new terrorist problem that we're facing is Afghan 2, the consequences of the fall of Kabul. And we've seen in the space of the last couple of years a significant increase in terrorist attacks within Pakistan. At this point in time, if we continue at the trajectory that the terrorist attacks are just taking place in this year, and we're not at the end of the year yet, but if it continues at this trajectory and we get to the end of the year, then this year, 2025, will be the bloodiest year Pakistan has seen as far as terrorism is concerned. Year after year, we've been the largest victims of terrorism. So far, 92,000 lives lost. Even this year, we hold the record, the glorious record, of being the country where the single largest number of terrorist attacks are taking place and the single largest number of victims of terrorism exist. It is in this context that we passionately advocate for regional cooperation, international cooperation to combat terrorism. The US just 2 days ago called Pakistan a phenomenal partner in combating terrorism. We have made close collaboration and CT efforts. Pakistan and India, since 2012, have had no collaboration on counterterrorism. The last collaboration we had was within the confines of this comprehensive dialogue that we now seek. Even in that cooperation, Pakistan shared information as far as LAT is concerned and the terrorists that were going to attack their country, which resulted in India taking action against those groups. India never supported Pakistan in our concerns about the BLA and the Majid Brigade and the support that they provide for these organizations. Even now, we believe that the only way for us to secure the future of South Asia from terrorism, from the new threats that we're going to face, will ultimately be cooperation between India and Pakistan. Without talking to one another, if you even look at the 2019 attack, which is the last attack that resulted in planes in the air, between that day and this day, the April 22nd attack in Palgan, no communication, no intelligence sharing took place as far as terrorism is concerned. And finally, the fact that India cannot turn off the taps is untrue. They've turned off the taps in the past. 1948, 1949, I believe it was, they shut Pakistan's water. They have been in violation of the, it then resulted in negotiating the Indus Water Treaty, dividing our, sharing the resources. Within the mechanisms of the Indus Water Treaty, we had complaints that India was violating the Indus Water Treaty, was damming places they shouldn't dam, was building structures they shouldn't build, was building structures larger than they were allowed to under the treaty. But those cases we were facing through the structure of this mechanism. What India has done is A, threatened to turn off the taps. And I want to repeat, just threatening to turn off the tap is a violation of the UN Charter. It's not about how much damage they have caused, just making this threat is a violation of international law. Now they implement it in two ways. One way is the extreme scenario where Pakistan has already laid out that this would be an act of war. That would be damming the rivers that are right in accordance to this treaty, carving out new canals on those three rivers. The other way that they damage us or they turn off the taps is you only have to delay the release of the water from this so-called tap by up to a week. 1 week's delay or even less would mean that our crops die. And our agriculture economy is devastated, our people is devastated, our food security has connotations of those. So, it's not about their ability or capacity to turn off the taps. This precedent should never be allowed to set. We cannot allow the weaponization of water in this way. We are seeking a new dialogue with India, where we will make new promises with one another, potentially sign new treaties. For that process to start, they need to respect all treaties. They need to take that decision. Take us back to the position that we were before this ceasefire, not just militarily, but also diplomatically.
I mean, if I may just ask, just add to it. How long do you think it would take to turn the tap off? How long does it take to build a dam? You'd blink, and we'd all have the answer. It takes 6 to 8 years. 2019 is when we had our skirmish. That was 6 years ago. That's how long it takes to build a dam. So when you say, have they turned the tap off? Should we wait when we are left with no water and the tap is actually turned off? So it doesn't take much to build a dam. It doesn't take much to build a canal. So the fundamental question is not have they turned the tap off, because the chairman has already answered that yes, they have. Over the past 1.5 months, they flooded and held back water when we needed it for cropping. And for the winter cropping, they're going to do it again because there's scarcity of water. And when they hold back water during winter cropping, our saplings, our seeds would die. And they only have to hold it back through the cascade of dams that they have just for about 10 days. And we'd have food security, we'd have drought. But that's not the fundamental question. The fundamental question is, when you're making policy, are you making policy for day before yesterday? we'd blink and we'd be in the 7th year. And then what are we going to do? That's basically fundamental to this dispute.
If anybody has a couple of final questions for me, then I have to step out to another interview, and I'll leave you in the very able hands of everybody else to also answer your questions. Gee, yes.
Thank you very much. This has been a very insightful afternoon. Greatly appreciate it. My name is Eric Piaget. I'm a researcher at the United Nations University in Bruges, and I'm coordinating a work package on science diplomacy at the VUB, which is part of this alliance of universities called Utopia. But I very much admire your commitment to dialogue and diplomacy. What I was interested in knowing is, of course, the ecosystem of diplomacy is much broader than foreign ministries. You track 1 and then track 2. The Institute of Multi-Track Diplomacy even has 9 different tracks of diplomacy: businesses, civil society, religious organizations. I was just curious to know how you might envision engaging these other diplomatic actors towards your
we take more questions.
Sure. We can do like a quick fire round of a couple of questions, and I'll go through.
Andreas Stignitz, work for the EAS. A very short question. Sorry. To which extent do you think that it is India is driven by its domestic agenda, and do you think another government in India would bring a different relationship between India and Pakistan?
Very good question.
Michel de Kemeter, Club of Brussels. We are experts in regeneration, socioeconomic and environmental. We did an inventory of over 100 projects of greening in the deserts, in hyper-arid areas. A lot of solutions exist, and I was wondering if you have also, because the water problem is going to be worse by the year. So we can try to manage what we can manage today, but we know is going to be worse. Solutions exist, local solutions for water management, flood captation, etc., etc. Do we have experiences like that and knowledge centers that knowledge can be shared with them in Pakistan or not? Or would you be interested to connect?
Okay, absolutely. I think then let's start answering those questions. Other tracks, it takes 2 to tango. So someone has to agree to any level of talk before a talk can take place. At the moment, India is doggedly disagreeing because I believe they find it convenient to use for them to have a justification to not talk and then unilaterally act, whether it was in 2019, the unilateral changes that they took within the Kashmir context or in the Indus Water Treaty. But obviously we will continue to pursue that path, and we would be very keen at any level and at any way if this conversation could start. I believe that a minimal improvement should be that at the moment we have DGMO to DGMO talks as far as the ceasefire implementation is concerned. The minimal elevation of that talks would be an NSA to NSA level talk, and then sort of develop it forward towards a comprehensive dialogue. As far as domestic politics, absolutely it's driven this. The only variable that has changed throughout this scenario is the domestic politics of India and the ruling government of India. Never before was water used as a weapon. Never before anyway, as far as their domestic politics is concerned, I also don't want to comment on it beyond the reasonable, I can comment on it from my concerns, but ultimately that's a decision that the Indian public has to make. It's a decision that the Indian public has made, and we in Pakistan have to deal with this reality. And the reality is that you have a new government in India that's a Hindutva government in India that seeks inspiration not from the Gandhian secular India, but by the RSS assassin that assassinated Gandhi. They have a completely different approach to how India should work, how the region should work. They're ideologically committed to the idea of Akhand Bharat, which means that a greater India, an imaginary India that never existed as a single entity, that exists in the minds of these Hindu extremists. And they want to impose that view of the world on the entire region. And it encompasses Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So I'm sure people are watching what's happened with the only nuclear armed neighbor with trepidation. But this map of the greater India, other countries in the world have similar aspirations. This map of Akhand Bharat is on the walls of the Indian Parliament. So they've painted what they'd like to see in the region. And they use the tool that they use to achieve this is they use the whistle of terrorism to demonize the Muslims in India, the Muslims in Indian occupied Kashmir, and now, by extension, the Muslims in Pakistan. And Europe knows all too well what happens when you normalize the dehumanization of a specific community anywhere in the world. They've done it, you've witnessed this in the past. They're doing it before our eyes. Obviously that has consequences. But we're saying we're willing to have dialogue with the devil in the interest of peace. We believe that India is not in its own, whatever its aspirations are, whatever its ideology is, the decisions that their leadership has made has left both sides less secure. It is not in the interest of India that we leave our fates in the hands of non-state actors and terrorists. On the one hand, every time talks have been derailed, they've been derailed because of a terrorist act. So even in those circumstances, we, the leaders of India and Pakistan, are not deciding the fate of our people. We're leaving it to the terrorists to decide that we're talking, so they'll go into an attack and we sabotage the talk. Modi or Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, the decision to go to war between two nuclear arms nations will also be taken by nameless, faceless terrorists who decide to attack at will. This entire corner that Modi is painting his country and our region into is not in our mutual interest. To say that we have fought generation after generation over Kashmir and we will continue to fight. We will never talk. To say that we fought then after that consistently over the issue of terrorism, but still we're not to talk or to investigate. And then to add to that a new fault line and say that now we damn the future generations of Pakistan and India to fight over water. That may be a fate that Modi is willing to damn his own citizens to. It's not a fate that I want to damn my citizens to, and we hold no ill will to the people of India. We would not want to damn them to this fate either. It will be a compulsion. We'll all have to talk to one another eventually to address these issues with the developments in our neighborhood over the last 24 hours. One border with Afghanistan was already, we're dealing with those consequences. Another border with India is a nuclear fault line, and our border with Iran is now under stress, to say it lightly. In that context, there's a false sense of calm that has prevailed, that now that we've received a ceasefire, it must mean that we've achieved a peace. We're further than that peace than we should be. And I believe that the European Union is very well placed to make the case for the respect for international law, to make the case for the non-weaponization of water, and to continue to make the case for dialogue and diplomacy as the only path to peace. I'm very sorry that I personally have to run, but I'm leaving my very, very able team behind to answer the rest of your questions. Thank you.
आला सतह पार्लिमानी वफ़द के सरबराह बिलावल भुट्टो जरदारी की यूरोपियन थिंक टैंक को खिते की सूरत हाल पर ब्रीफिंग। उन्होंने कहा कि भारतीय जारियत पर पाकिस्तान ने तहम्मुल से काम लिया। भारत ने सिंध तास मुआहदा गैर कानूनी तौर पर यकतरफा मुअत्तल किया।